Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from Phoenix Business RadioX in Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center, right here in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. And I am, as always, very excited, and I never say that and not mean it, about today's conversation with two experts that we are very fortunate to have spending the morning with us. We have Andy Call. He's the Director of School of Accountancy with W.P. Carey School of Business at ASU. Thank you for coming, 2 or 3 miles down the road to see us.
It's great to be here.
Happy to have you. And Chad Dean, CEO of Integrated Management Resources, LLC. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We did this a little backwards. We got to meet over coffee thanks to Joe Puz with Project Management Office Hours and the PMO squad. You two had met at an Arizona Technology Council mixer, I think, not too long ago. And Chad's like, I'm thinking about maybe a podcast, right? And Joe's like, I know the team for you. So we got to meet over coffee, and we're already talking about perhaps doing a show, a regular program with you.
Absolutely.
As the host. So we figured we'd give them the guest experience first. And what an important topic for us to talk about, as Chad has shared with me, around the career, a career in accounting and finance. And so who better to help us than our friends at ASU? So before we get into the topic around where is this career headed and what's going on right now and how can we be champions for it in the Metro Phoenix area as business leaders, let's have both of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background and the role that you play and serve today. Are you comfortable starting, Andy?
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the Director of the School of Accountancy at ASU, which is more or less means department chair. And I've been at ASU for 10 years on the faculty, and the last 5 years I've been in this specific role, leading the department. And prior to that, I was on the faculty at the University of Georgia, and ultimately got my PhD back in the day at the University of Washington in Seattle, and undergraduate degrees.
You made it all around.
Yeah, moved around a lot, and we've loved being here on a family level, and professionally it's been great. And, you know, ASU is in many ways a unique university because of its mission and its scale. And the scale is not accidental. It's very intentional. But it's great because there's an actual purpose behind what we're doing that resonates with me a lot. So it's been great.
Excellent. And from Georgia was the move to here?
Correct.
Yes. Where is the...
It's in Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half. It's in Northeast Georgia, about an hour and a half from Atlanta.
Okay.
So it's great. It's a quintessential college town. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for the national championship years that have been more recent, but
right.
I still root for the Bulldogs.
Very good. I ask around Georgia because our parent company, Business RadioX, hails out of Sandy Springs, which is just outside of Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I think they have 6 little brick and mortar studios like mine, and then the rest of us are licensed partners around the country. So every time I hear about Georgia and Atlanta area, I feel warm and fuzzy. Thank you for the introduction. How about you, Chad?
Well, I'm a native of Arizona. I was born on Williams Air Force Base, which is now Gateway Airport. And I grew up in Central Scottsdale, right down by Scottsdale Fashion Square. That's my home grounds, the old hood. And I got into recruiting 27 years ago. I was living in Austin, Texas. I couldn't find a real job. So I found my way into recruiting and started recruiting engineers. And I was quickly called back to Phoenix by a friend of mine whose father had passed away unexpectedly. And she was running this firm with her mother and didn't really know what she was doing. And I didn't know that he had that business prior to getting into recruiting. So it was kind of neat. And so I came back, started working with her. And then we built that company up. We sold it. So I worked myself out of a job and then bumbled around a couple of years, still recruiting. And then I found my way to integrated management in 2002 and started working there. And we were doing Wall Street recruiting at the time. We're recruiting front office quants, salespeople, traders for hedge funds and banks. And then I took over ownership in 2009 because basically the company was not doing so hot. If you remember back then, right? The financial crisis. So I took over ownership of the company at that point in time. And we continued to work with Wall Street banks and hedge funds. And then we decided to diversify. I had a consultant that said, hey, you're a native of Phoenix. Phoenix is growing exceptionally. It's a fantastic market. Why aren't you doing any business in Phoenix? And I said, I don't know. So came up with a game plan, started putting that together, starting to do a little business, and then started our big blitz and in January of 2020. So that went over
Gulp.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that went over well. But we managed to grind through that. And we have two disciplines here. One is IT and one is accounting and finance. And so it's great to be able to talk with Andy, an expert in the accounting field, and discuss what we're going to talk about today. And so
Yeah.
that's it.
Great introduction from both of you. Thank you. When you and I spoke after Joe's introduction, and we talked about, what we do here at Business Radio X and how important stories are around bringing us closer together as a community, in addition to helping lift each other up. You pointed out an article that was was the Wall Street Journal recently about accounting. Can you just speak to that for those who aren't familiar with it? I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be. It's because they'll be coming to listen to the two of you speak on this topic. But set the stage for us around that, and then let's just engage in a conversation around, really, what is this article saying? What of it is true? What are we seeing at ASU and in the greater Phoenix area? And then what are we going to do about it?
Fantastic. So as I'm talking to leaders in the Valley, there's a tremendous shortage of people at the staff accounting level, at the senior accounting level, and even at the accounting manager level. And I was talking with a leader and they said, "Hey, have you seen the article from the Wall Street Journal?" And I said, "No, I haven't seen that. Please send it to me." Send it over. The gist of the article is basically that there's been they use the number 17% decline in enrollment over the last couple of years at major universities in the accounting discipline. So I then read that article, and then I was on a call with another leader and I said, "Hey, have you heard about this article?" And the leader says, "Yeah, read it." Talk to another leader. "Yeah, read it." Talk to another leader. "Yeah, in fact, my uncle sent me that article. He's a retired engineer and sent me that article." And now I'm thinking this thing is spreading far and wide in not only the finance community, but in just elsewhere. So I found that kind of fascinating. But it's true. There's such a huge shortage. I just have a couple of stats. So I ran a quick search this morning before we got on here for staff accountant title, which covers junior, the regular staff title, and the senior staff accountant level. There are 170 openings in the Phoenix area currently.
Wow.
And if you go to level up accounting manager, 131 openings in the Valley. And every company is concerned about how do they retain accountants? How do we manage the hybrid versus on-site? Because frankly, accountants and finance tend to go into the office more than an IT or maybe marketing or something like that. So they're all trying to figure out how we retain our staff. How do we keep them happy? And so that was the premise of everything. What really sparked this idea for this particular podcast.
I'm anxious, Andy, to hear what you have to say.
It's absolutely an issue, and we see it on campus, and we interact very closely with the firms all in the Valley, and we talk with them, and they're seeing it as well. It's not even that new. Sadly, it's been a few years that this has been a real trend in enrollments. I'll touch on enrollments a little bit more in a minute, but in general, it's, I think, a pretty unique dynamic right now because accounting enrollments at the university level across the country are down double digits, and it's been several years. But at the same time, the demand for them is
Right.
through the roof, and it arguably has never been higher. So it seems like it's solvable, but there are some real barriers in the way. So just to give a little bit of context on our campus, the W.P. Carey School of Business is the largest business school in the country. We have total enrolled students in excess of 19,000 at any point in time right now. That includes undergraduates, graduates across any degree program, online students, etc. And even in that context where the business school is large and has been growing every year, our accounting enrollments have been on the decline. So even in that little microcosm of a growing business school, accounting has been shrinking. And that's been something that we've been working hard to try to address. And I should say, I think we've stopped with the bleeding and are on the slight uptick, but it's been a challenge. And we can talk about the reasons why that is.
I think that's important. I was just going to ask that. And I feel like you and I, in an email exchange amongst the three of us as we prepared for today's segment, I think you had said part of it's messaging. Am I right in thinking that that's what you had shared?
Yes.
I don't know what that means. So if you could spend some time on that. Is it just that accounting and finance isn't sexy enough for people anymore?
That's a large part of it. Now, with messaging, I don't want to say that that's the only reason.
Sure.
I don't want to say, oh, if only students understood the right message, then there'd be no problem. That's because it's more complex than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the messaging issue is partly that, again, these are 19, 20-year-old students largely when they're choosing a major. And what they understand about accounting isn't always an accurate representation of what their actual career would look like. Because when they think about accounting, I think what they're often thinking about would be better described as bookkeeping, which admittedly I wouldn't want to do either necessarily as a career, and doesn't sound very attractive. And sometimes I joke and say, oh, if only we could tell them that no, it's actually audit and tax. That's probably not even a better story even then. But it's even more broad than that. It's not just audit and tax, although a lot of people obviously start their careers there. Accounting is such a great place, and maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm an accounting professor, but accounting is such a great place to start your career in business, even if you have no plans to be an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many examples of that, of effective leaders who've gone through the accounting or finance path, and they're not day-to-day accountants. So I think there's that kind of broader perspective of how you can leverage an accounting degree for your good. I would even argue if you want to go into marketing, but have some accounting and understand margins and understand all these, financial trade-offs that are involved in the marketing decisions, and you'll be effective there. Obviously, you need some marketing training too, but
yeah.
But messaging also, I think there's also a generational issue, because I think young people today want different things out of their career than was the case 25 years ago when I was in college. They want purpose. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually maybe quite good, but I think sometimes it's harder to see that in accounting, even though it's there. But they want to be part of something that matters beyond just collecting a paycheck and climbing a corporate ladder, which is totally fair. But accounting, again, I would argue can help you get there, but that's hard to convey. So that's mainly what I mean when I say there's a messaging issue. But I think the problems go beyond messaging, but messaging is a real challenge.
I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let's flash back to you. What was the inspiration for you to even go after an accounting degree? And did you have that choice prior to doing your undergraduate classes? And I mean, was that, I want to be an accountant from age 8? Where did that stem from?
Not from age 8, I'm happy to say.
Yeah.
So I did my undergraduate degree and master's degrees in accounting at BYU in Provo, Utah. And at the time, and this is almost maybe a good microcosm of the broader issue. At the time, when you were in the business school there as an undergraduate student, accounting, of all the majors, that was the place to be. It was, oh, you're an accounting major. Kudos to you. And in fairness, they have always had and still have a great accounting program. But I don't think, and I still have some, contacts there in the business school there. It's still obviously a great program, but in terms of cachet, among the undergrads, accounting doesn't have the disproportionate gravitas among students that it did then. And I think I'm not commenting on BYU specifically. I think that's true in general. So I chose accounting partly because I liked it. I did well at it. Frankly, I had an older brother who had done accounting, so that I had that kind of in my DNA a little bit and in my environment. But also where I was, accounting was like, if you can do accounting, you do accounting because it's such an elite program. And I'm glad I did. Zero regrets. But I don't know that that's the same narrative or dynamic on many college campuses today.
So do you feel that BYU, I'm sure you're still connected to the program, does it still hold that status today that it held when you were there?
It is still very highly ranked, for sure. Among undergrads, and I know some people who recruit there, and there are other programs who I think have, so it's not that accounting has gotten worse. I think other programs have caught up
Mhm.
in terms of reputation and stature and even initial placements. You can do well from lots of other degrees, whereas historically accounting was just, it was the place.
So I think it begs the question that I'm asking just as an outsider listening in, where are we at with pay, rate of pay and salary for these types of positions? Is that part of the challenge as well?
I'll answer that. And I pulled up an article from accounting.com. I don't know if they're a big expert
Sounds
in the
important.
space, but it does say that if you're an accountant, you make double the median wage of all occupations nationwide. And also notes there's above average growth projections for accounting jobs, 10% between 2016 and 2026, with 1.5 million employment in 2026 in accounting. I don't feel that it's really a pay situation, frankly, because when you get up into the upper levels of accounting, you're getting paid well.
Yeah.
One of the issues is the big four, and it's around hours worked, frankly. So when you talk to somebody in the big four and they've spent 3 or 4 years in the big four doing audit or tax or something like that.
Can you define big four for those of us who are clueless?
Sure. So those are the big consulting firms.
Okay.
If I'm allowed to mention names,
Yeah.
Deloitte and Touche.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard of that,
Okay.
right? So KPMG. So the 3 or 4 year individuals in there, they're making maybe 70 to 75,000. I've been in the business for 3 or 4 years, but they're pulling 70 to 80 hour weeks. And that is a big problem for the accounting profession because they recruit heavily out of the universities and they are pulling from the top programs. But when you're hearing that, wow, I got to work 78 hours a week, and now there's this big work-life balance thing that's happened with COVID, right? So that's only in the last 3 years. You're saying that there's been an enrollment problem for longer than that. Now you throw the work-life balance in there, and so I believe it's not so much a pay, but I think that is part of the big four's problem is how many hours they're working, and they're trying to address that. They know it's a problem. Right?
Yes, they're absolutely trying to make sure that employees have a good experience there. And some of the big four are even ranked and as, by Fortune as being one of the best places to work because they're really leaning into that. It's interesting to hear your perspective because I agree 100% that there's that barrier that some students think about when they think about going to big four. What is that? Or not big four. I don't want to pick on big four, public accounting, and think about what that means in terms of work-life balance. The pay issue has come up regularly over the years on campus, not necessarily from students, but from faculty. When we've talked with firms about some of the enrollment trends we're seeing, accounting tends to be countercyclical. Demand for accounting, I should say, tends to be countercyclical because when it's just more stable. That audits need to happen in good economies and in bad economies. Tax work needs to be done regardless. Consulting work is a little bit more, would vary more. But so for many years, we've been in a relatively strong economy. And some of these other degree programs, for example, finance, that their students are getting investment banking opportunities that are paying much more than public accounting is. And that gets students' attention. And no one's rooting for the economy to sour, but historically when that happens, some of those high-paying jobs in fintech or in technology spaces dry up, whereas accounting stays pretty stable. So that's the blessing and the curse of the stability of the accountants. It can be a little countercyclical. But yeah, I remember being at a big symposium with accounting professors from all over the country, and we were meeting with one of these big four firms, and this issue came up about salary. And this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And the big four really hadn't done a lot to bump up salaries in a while. And in fairness to them, it's very expensive to do because you're not just bumping up starting pay, you're bumping up now the second years and the fourth years and managers and et cetera, all the way up the food chain. But anyway, at the time they were still more or less getting the numbers of staff that they needed, and which arguably discouraged a big salary bump because they were staffing things okay. And I remember an accounting professor from a different university raised his hand and said, you might be filling your seats, but what you're not seeing is all the great talent in our business schools that isn't showing up at your door and isn't working for your firm because they're choosing other majors that they think has more upside because you're keeping your wages so low. So you might be getting people, but are you getting the same caliber of people? And are those people going to stay and thrive long term? Don't be short-sighted on this salary thing. So to their credit, at least in the Phoenix area, the Big Four has bumped up pay, 10 to 12, 10 to 15,000 even in the last 2 to 3 years, which is more than I thought they would do so quickly. Is it still lagging some other opportunities? Sure. And if you go outside public accounting, I think pay tends to be a little higher than that even still. But yeah, these are all part of the problem. There's all these different factors converging and making it a challenge.
It's funny that you say the level of talent that they're able to recruit. So you'll talk to somebody 5-6 years in public accounting for one of the larger firms, and all they do is talk about how the quality has dropped of the people that they've hired. Exactly what you said. So that's fascinating that you brought that up. They're not seeing the best talent. So we were looking at this problem, and you said in your email to us, a lot of it is on messaging. Tell me what that means and how far down does messaging go and into the grade schools? How do we
I was just going
to
to ask that same question. As a former assistant principal for an elementary school in Kyrene, I was thinking through that. And we've had these conversations around STEM education and helping kids build up through, career readiness. Great question. Does it go back to that? And I think the other piece for us, from a very general layperson's perspective, which is my role here, is accountant. I feel like a dumb question, but I think it needs to be asked. Is accounting a necessary component and department within organizations? The answer to me, I think, is duh. Yes, of course. So there we go. Pandora's box.
Yeah. So I would love to do more at the high schools. The challenge is just logistics because if you get access to one high school, that's, several hundred students a year, depending on the school. But many of those aren't going to go on to a 4-year university regardless, or to college anyway. And of those that do, many aren't at all interested in business, let alone accounting. They're just not interested in business. They're going to go into liberal arts or something else, which is great. So it becomes, how many potential accountants are you even really talking to? And is that the best way to, leverage our resources, the limited resources we have to do this? And we'd love to get there, and I think we will, but I'll tell you 2 places where we are focusing our messaging. One is at the community college level. At that point, they've already moved on to higher education. And if we're in the right classes, those are business classes. So they've already self-identified as being interested in business broadly, even if that's not accounting. So we're working really hard with our advisory board, which has, 15 to 20 of the firms locally with leadership from them. We work together closely with them to reach the community colleges. I mean, we're very lucky here. We have the Maricopa Community College system is great. There's 10 different campuses, all within 25 minutes of our campus-ish. And, we're obviously a primary destination for a lot of those students. So that's been great. The other place we're really being intentional about is on our own campus, when business students who are already part of the W.P. Carey School of Business, they have to take an introductory financial accounting course. This is typically done in their sophomore year. And, given our scale, we're teaching 5,000 students a year in that course. But those students are sophomores. Yeah, they have a declared major, but they've made no real investments down that path or any one path. So we really want them to have a good experience in that class. a lot of universities will put their very, very best teachers and faculty in master's programs and other places that are smaller audience. We've got great faculty there as well, but we've been very intentional to put the right people in those positions to help the students have a good experience. Rigorous, yes, I'm not saying easy, but to understand, help the students understand what accounting is and what it isn't. And while we're there, we do some pretty intentional, direct, overt messaging. For example, we're creating videos with various high-profile alumni who've gone on to do all kinds of interesting things. An FBI agent, or Tom Harris, who's the CFO of the Arizona Diamondbacks, is a graduate of our program. And we've gone and done videos at Chase Field, where he's been very gracious and to help students see, accounting doesn't lead to sitting in a dark closet with a spreadsheet. It can lead to all kinds of industries and all kinds of really cool things. But we're trying to get that message across, not when they're juniors and seniors, that's too late, but when they're still at a decision point where if it resonates with them, that they can make a pivot. And last thing I'll mention on this is I don't pretend that every undergraduate business student should do accounting. There's so many great programs in our own college and in other business schools. And some of them, some students should not do accounting. They'd be better served doing something else. But again, I'm biased. I think there are more who would benefit and their careers would benefit from having an accounting foundation than are actually taking advantage of that opportunity.
I would agree with that. So let's take the burden a little bit off the universities. What can companies do? The FANG companies, right? Facebook, Apple, Google, they are amazing at promoting themselves on social media. There's no secret that there was a massive shortage of engineers. Not so much anymore, and ChatGPT might actually take over a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this massive shortage of engineers, and everybody wanted to go to engineering school, become a software engineer, and go to work for one of the FANG companies. What can companies themselves do better, do you believe, to promote accounting and promote a career path within their organization for accounting?
I think it's some of the things that we've been hitting on in terms of, pay and your comments, which I totally agree with, about work-life balance and having interesting work that isn't boring accounting work. And it ultimately isn't, but helping young people see that. But I think the challenge is that companies like Google and say Honeywell, who's here local, I don't know that they have much incentive to address the accounting issue because they don't need, as long as they're getting what they need, and I don't know, maybe some are and some aren't. But the ones who they're focused on their core business, which isn't about accounting or staffing accounting, because they want to staff in so many different areas. The ones who have the most incentive to address this are the public accounting firms, because that is the lion's share of their teams, and universities, certainly schools of accountancy, because that's what we do. So frankly, we've had a hard time engaging non-public accounting. We have several on our advisory board that are awesome. Some banks and some others that do, executive compensation consulting and really interesting stuff here locally. But I would love to have more of them on our advisory board so that they can be part of this. It's just hard because they're not recruited. Large public accounting firms like the Big Four are recruiting and hiring, 20 plus, 30 plus every year. So they have strong incentives to be present and visible on campus. Some of these other employers might need 2 a year from our campus. So we're wanting to engage them more, but it's a challenge because the incentives are not as strong for them as they are for us.
I'd like to put a little plug in for public accounting. When you come out with 3 or 4 years of audit experience or tax experience, you jump the level in accounting through the roof and quickly move into a controller role. Shortly after that is VP of accounting, and then ultimately to CFO. That's where they want to go. But for public accounting, and it doesn't have to be one of the Big Four. There's a lot of other good public accounting firms. You really jump far in your career if you put in the 3 years of those hours and that work, you really can excel very quickly. And there isn't a company, let's call it a 50 million plus revenue company, that isn't looking for somebody with a solid degree. And I would like somebody with Big Four experience. I'm like, do you know how hard that is
Yeah.
to get somebody with Big Four? Let's start with public accounting, and that's very difficult as well. But they all want that experience. And so a plug for that, which isn't necessarily a plug for the $50 million company that wants to hire a junior recruiter right out of school. But that's a tremendous leap in somebody's career.
I totally agree. And I'll go further. I mean, public accounting is a great career, even if you stay there, whether it's Big Four or not. I have a college roommate who I'm still in good contact with, and he's a partner at Deloitte in Houston and loving it and doing great things. But I agree with you that even if you go to public accounting and determine that that's not the right fit for you long term, which is fine and totally normal, the longer you wait, the more you can jump levels outside of public accounting. So there really is. It's a great place to start a career. It's a great place to finish a career. But yeah, everyone will have their own career path, but they're great.
For our listeners who may be coming to this with accounting in mind as a career, you had kind of noted this earlier, Andy. What is accounting and what is it not? Can we spend some time at a really baseline level for just a couple minutes and have you both speak to that? What is it? What is it? What isn't it? And maybe paint the picture for the important role that these people would play in the success of a business.
Go ahead.
Yeah, tag team.
I'm not an expert in accounting.
Well, accounting is not bookkeeping. That might be the very
Basic.
basic kind of starting point. And as a quick aside, that's a hard narrative to push back against, because in that introductory financial accounting course I was describing a few minutes ago, you are starting with some of the basics, debits and credits and journal entries, which certainly has a flavor of bookkeeping, but we're just building a foundation so you can get to the interesting stuff. What accounting is it's being able to prepare and or use financial information for sound decision making.
Forecasting.
Yes, it could be internally. So when you're forecasting what sales are going to be, or trying to make decisions about, how to use your capital internally. So there's a huge role for people who understand accounting data just to help run the business effectively and efficiently. And that colors every department of a business. Like I mentioned earlier, the marketing department, the sales department, all of them are touching on financially motivated decisions. Or it's external. You might not work for the company. You might be evaluating the company as an investor or as an analyst externally. All of those individuals need a strong foundation in accounting. There's a video we've created that we share sometimes with students that shows Warren Buffett, obviously a famous billionaire investor. And he's asked in a couple various different settings. They say, hey, what advice would you give to students these days, like college students? What would you tell them? This is not an accounting people asking him the question. They're just saying, hey, it's Warren Buffett. What advice would you give? And he says, number one, you got to know your accounting. It's the language of business, which obviously is a tagline. But he goes, if you don't know that, it's like you're operating in a foreign land and you don't know the language. You have to know accounting. And so there's so many. It's to summarize, I would just say what I said a minute ago. It is being comfortable with and knowing how to prepare and or use, depending on what roles you take, financial data that leads to sound decision making. And that manifests itself all over a business.
Beautifully stated.
I'm going to throw a more important thing in there, and it's the health of the economy.
Right.
When you look at audit, let's just flash back to a company called Enron and what a disaster that was. And the audit process is so important for the health of our economy that people can trust the numbers that are coming out. That is what a fundamental, healthy capitalist economy is built on. And Warren Buffett, I love that. I have not heard that. I like to listen to what he has to say, and it's so fundamental when you're looking at anything and you're looking at investing in a company, you need to be able to look at the books. You need to be able to look at the balance sheet, the income statement, and figure out what's going on in there. And so the audit side of things is so very important. And then you also touched on it that the accounts get to work with sales, with HR, with all different parts of the company. So they have like this view of the company that if you're in sales, you don't have that. If you're in supply chain, you don't necessarily have that view. They have an entire view of the organization. I think part of the other shortage problem is a lot of people that come in with an accounting degree move in onto the finance side, or they move into operations. And so these other functions within the organization pull a lot of people from accounting because of their knowledge of the business. And so it's, if you're thinking about going into accounting, you realize that you're getting a really good view of the organization and how important that role is. And so if we could make it sexy again and make it better than, it's going to be really hard for Chat GPT to go in and look at the subledgers and figure out where something's going wrong. Whereas that's what accountants do. They go in and make sure that everything's correct.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that comment about auditing, because you're exactly right. This is kind of at the societal level, the value of accounting, but without an audit, investors wouldn't invest, banks wouldn't lend, the flow of capital would grind to a halt, and so would the economy right with it. And I don't think that's really an overstatement. Now, that doesn't mean that every individual needs to say, oh, that's how I'm going to spend my time or my career. But when we're talking about younger people often wanting to be involved in something that matters, accounting matters. It matters to society. It's not just some sideshow. You mentioned Chat GPT. A colleague of mine mentioned recently, I think there was some article about this, that Chat GPT recently took and failed the CPA exam. So we were happy to see that.
That's amazing, because everything else I've heard from Chat GPT, it's passing with flying colors. Almost
I'm sure it will
absurdly.
improve.
Yes, right. We can leave it to that. However, it can't, to the degree that people can assess, advise, do all those other things, right? As we know with AI, it can help us get somewhere a little bit faster when it comes to research and that sort of thing, or putting things together. But those critical decision-making points, we still need to rely on really smart people who understand the mission and the vision, the purpose and the passion behind what a company represents and how they serve their community.
For sure. And on the topic of AI, this is another, I think, connects to our messaging issue. I hear a lot of people, even prominent, influential people, when they talk about automation in industries that are going to be heavily impacted, accounting often gets thrown in.
That's misleading.
I think it is. I mean, I think it's fair if we're talking about bookkeeping.
Yep.
That is odd. Even QuickBooks and other things like that have already done that, and it's going to get better and better. Sure. But but you don't need to go to a highly ranked 4-year accounting program to go be a bookkeeper. That would be overkill. If you're going through our program or one like ours somewhere else in the country, you're going into something, it's preparing you for something much larger than that involves decision making and critical thinking and analysis that is much harder to automate. So I would say that automation it might be impacting bookkeeping, yes, but that's not what we're here to do. Automation is changing how we do what we do, for sure. Technology in general has completely transformed. It's had a big impact on our curriculum. Mm-hmm. We have a very professionally driven program where we're trying, we're close to the profession. We're trying to prepare students for a profession. So stay close to that. And our program definitely brings in all kinds of data analytics and other technologies to help students. But all that means is that they still have great jobs. They're just entering into the job function at a higher level to do more interesting things sooner and add more value sooner because they can leverage technology. Mm-hmm. But the need for them as humans, as trained accountants, has never been higher.
I want to ask a question, and I'll give my opinion first, but let's take away the Honeywells, let's take away the large employers in this town, and let's focus on companies in the 25 million to maybe 750 million range, where they are having the most difficulty attracting accountants. There's such a disparity that I see between organizations, and not naming any names, just one organization to the next. One, you ask people how their work-life balance is, and they're an accountant. They'll say, "Oh, it's great. I work 40 to 50 hours." And then you go to the next one, and the person's like, "I need to get out of here. I'm working 70 hours a week." Same function, different company. So there has to be more of a focus on retention, because going out and hiring an accountant, or anybody for that matter, is expensive. You have to go through the recruiting process. Your seat is open for a while. Other people are having to work harder. And now that's bringing their work-life balance down and their happiness. And so the cost of filling these seats is tremendous. The company should be working more strongly on retaining that talent, and fixing the work-life balance that can occur in that monthly cycle of closing the books every month, getting more efficient in the close process. Public companies have to be closed in 5 days. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Yep.
Whereas I hear private companies, it's the 15th and they're still closing the books. So work on using technology maybe to efficiently close the books, and create a better work-life balance for your accountants. And you maybe spend a little bit more on that technology to increase the speed of the close, but that saves you money of having to go out and continually backfill your accounting roles. If you look at a lot of accountants, they're changing jobs every 2.5 years or less. So the real focus for these smaller companies, I believe, is on retention. When I look at somebody who's been an accountant for 7 years, I'm like, that company's doing a good job. And so do you have any thoughts around what the let's call them medium-sized companies, what they can do within the accounting realm?
I completely agree about retention. Obviously, that's important for everyone, but especially for these types of employers you're talking about. Sometimes we'll meet with employers of that size, and they're more or less competing with the big four firms for young talent. And I'll point out and say, your own senior leadership, you learn about their background, and the senior leadership at some of these smaller employers, they started at the big four. And then at some midpoint in their career, they transitioned over. And I'll just make the observation that to someone you're recruiting out of college, if they might want to work for your firm. They might want to be in your exact shoes and have all that resonate. But what they're seeing is that to get there, and how you got there, was to go start somewhere else. And if you have people internally that you hired at a young age, and they also stayed and were promoted and thrived and had a great career, all within the confines of your great environment and culture and whatever else you bring to the table, that's impactful. But it can't be that you're only putting in front of them people who've taken a path that you are now asking them, not the student, not to take. So and I don't know that they always think about it that way. So we'll often have that conversation. Not that we're trying to discourage students from going to Big Four. We just want them to have options and make the decision that makes sense for them.
It just also goes back to messaging and what the candidates, our younger generation, is looking at as they make these decisions about their career.
Is there a national organization that is also part of the messaging? Maybe the CPAs,
Several.
Society of America.
Yeah. So on the academic side, there's the American Accounting Association. On the more professional side, there's the AICPA and others that are. It's actually been quite nice because there's never been really any competition or anything among universities or et cetera. But it's nice to see everyone kind of come together. Different universities all sharing the same problem. The professional side has the same problem, and working together to try to help. We have a member of our own faculty who works very closely with a group of, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 faculty from around the country, but with EY to help with messaging and other things of that nature. And it's nice to see everyone come together and rally around a common problem that we have a shared interest in helping address.
As we kind of close up our time together, and I'm Deeply appreciative of this conversation. What can businesses do to better support the influx of people interested in accounting positions? I mean, what kind of what's the takeaway that you guys are mulling around as we have this conversation and you think about and talk about it in your daily practices?
I like the messaging. I like the changing of the promoting within. So important, right? People, when they're looking at a company and evaluating, if they see people that have progressed, that's going to be a much more attractive organization. So the management, starting from the officer level down, needs to be aware of that. Not just the CFO, the CEO, COO needs to be aware of the perception that's in the accounting department. And if you have a tremendous amount of turnover, you need to seriously evaluate what's going on and talk with the people that are working for you and get their feedback, because if they're not happy, they're talking to a recruiter, right? And so you would rather them talk to you and tell you, and maybe get a few of them together and create a mastermind to figure out what can we do within our organization to make this a better path. Companies need to look in the mirror when they're having a tremendous amount of turnover and figure out what's the source of that problem. And that, to me, frankly, because that's the level I'm dealing with, is at the company level. That's where I want to see organizations improve, so that I don't want to get a resume of somebody that's been a year and a half here and 2.5 years here, and then 6 months. What happened? I got in, it was a totally different situation than what was portrayed to me. How is that possible? How can it come in unless the individual completely heard only what they want to hear? But is that messaging consistent across every interviewer that's involved in the process about the career path? And so I want to see the term that a rising tide raises all boats. I want to see the accounting profession get better, less turnover. And that way, again, it goes back to, hey, it's cool again to be an accountant, because you understand the importance of what you're playing within the organization.
I agree. I think our takeaways are very similar. The way I think about it is, I think that universities, and by that I mean accounting programs, and the employers both need to take a step back and make sure that what we're delivering is consistent with what we're selling. Because I talked about that sophomore level class where we're talking about, oh, look at all the great things you can do in accounting. Okay, but is our curriculum, if they choose accounting, is our curriculum consistent with that? Or are we funneling them down some narrow path that is, that doesn't resonate in the way we were selling it? That's one of the things, and we didn't get into it, which is totally fine, but that we're trying to do on campuses, expand the nature of undergraduate curriculum in accounting in our own program, so that it's not just a one size fits all. It doesn't have to be just a CPA shop necessarily. So I think we need to make sure that on the academic side that we're offering, we say you can do anything, but are we really giving them an educational experience that is consistent with go off and do anything? And the employers similarly, they care a lot about work-life balance, and they want their teams to have good experiences when they get there. Are their teams, particularly the younger people, having the type of experience day to day that is interesting and that is empowering and that is engaging their mind, as opposed to just once they're hired and you don't worry about it? So I think we all need to make sure that we're delivering on what the message that we're trying to convey.
My mind goes to, and hopefully I have a few more minutes to talk about this if it's something that resonates with you. I'm going to use the word personality, the personality of someone who at an early age, you mentioned, kind of said to Andy, were you interested in accounting when you were age 8? So being a former elementary school administrator and third grade teacher, I go to these young kids, right? I've got a 15-year-old, he wants to be an engineer. And we're excited to have those conversations, because engineering isn't just this anymore. Who knows what kind of engineering jobs are going to be available to him just because of how everything's changing and advancing. He's also the kind of kid who is very well-rounded in his soft skills and his ability to communicate and think critically and creatively. So I guess there's a question there that I'm asking myself. Is accounting still drawing, or has the student that accounting is appealing to, are we helping those students be a broader leader and a broader individual? And even if, is that necessary? I know I asked that because of my experience in the conversations we've had with AZ Tech Council and the SciTech Institute, who have been working on leadership skills for the engineer type personality. I'll just say it like that, who is such a critical thinker and really fascinated with the way things work. And we've been working to help them communicate more effectively so that, K-12, they're coming out not only with that massive muscle built around how they naturally think and show up, and they're also able to more readily communicate it and share themselves in a way that is easier to understand. So again, I just put that out there. Any thoughts about that? And it's okay if you say no, Karen. Let's shut this baby down.
I'm going to let you talk to that because I have a biology degree, and so nothing to do with accounting.
I would say, yes, that is important, that they have a well-rounded, accounting is not, to be successful in accounting, it's not just about being good at the numbers. And even the numbers, there's no math really here. It's the calculator that came preloaded on your iPhone does all the math you need to do through our entire program. It's not about math. There's numbers involved, yes, but it's applying it to business questions and business problems and addressing it. Accounting isn't even about a single right answer the way there would be in a math problem. So there's all kinds of scope for critical thinking and decision making and analysis that should attract more than just, I'm good with numbers, I like my math class in high school, therefore I'll do accounting. We want those students too. I think they can do well as well. And that for them, we're trying to bring out some of the softer skills. Mm-hmm. But those who aren't, all-stars in math, there absolutely is a role for them, because what this really is business. It's often business advising in some financial capacity. And that's very client-facing. And we focus a ton on that in our master's program. Admittedly, less at the undergraduate level because there's more nuts and bolts to get through. But yeah, they need to be client ready, and that involves communicating comfortably with clients and even with your own superiors and teams. That's certainly verbal communication. It's written communication. Making presentations to convey, this is my recommendation. This is what our analysis was and where we're headed with this. That's a real life thing that doesn't fit into a neat little box of this was the right answer. So we need people. The profession would benefit from more people who have those types of broad backgrounds and skills. And one thing we're trying to do on campus is, in our master's program, historically, the students in our master's program, it's a 1 year, kind of a 5th year program. Historically, it's been 98% students who have an undergraduate degree in accounting, which is great. And there's certainly a lot of value proposition to getting that 5th year master's program. I did the same thing. What we're trying to do is expand the pipeline so that if you have an undergraduate degree in anything, you said biology, is that what you said?
Yes.
Welcome to the master's program in accounting. We might have you do a few classes just to make sure you're ready.
But not just in the School of Business, really.
Even outside the school of business.
I'm glad you spoke to that, because I was thinking that earlier. I've witnessed when we've had conversations with other university level professors and leaders, they're making this path towards a career so much more flexible. Thank goodness, right? It's not curriculum driven. It's opportunity and career driven, so that you could jump the track that used to only look like it was 3 different tracks going in different directions. Now universities and schools within those departments are saying, listen, this makes sense career wise. Add this to your biology degree, add this to your marketing degree, whatever.
That's such an appealing package to employers as well,
Yes.
because you'll have the accounting, but you'll have some richness behind it. Like biology, for example, that'd be such a good background to have whether you're auditing a biotech or consulting with it. Marrying those together is really powerful. so this last year, just graduated a week ago, we had about 95 master students in our graduate programs. And of those 95, 11 came from non-accounting undergraduate programs, which has been great. And you talk to the faculty who taught those classes, and they'd say, oh, those non-accounting undergrads, I know who they are, and they're disproportionately killing it in the classroom. They're motivated, they're well prepared, they're doing awesome. And they add so much to the classroom. They love having them there, and the firms and employers gobble them up. It's a really powerful thing to marry, even if it's within the business school, finance and accounting, supply chain and accounting. It's a really attractive way to start your career.
I'm going to throw one last plug in for the accounting. When somebody graduates from one of the major universities and their degree is business administration, a lot of those people just go straight into a sales role,
It's just
right?
general.
It's so general. Whereas if they were to throw accounting on there, now my degree's in accounting, doesn't mean you're stuck in accounting. You don't have to go and be an accountant, but you can go into an accounting and quickly leapfrog where you would have been from an income standpoint, rather than coming out with just a general business administration. Now, I don't want to get a call from the head of business administration at ASU, but that's a recommendation that I have for individuals that want to get a head start in their career and come out and have a different perspective of an organization rather than just going into sales.
It sounds so much more credible coming from him than from me. I like that.
I don't know about that.
Well,
No, just
I
kidding.
have a vested interest, but I
Yes.
100% agree. And the one last thing I'll say on this topic is what a lot of young people want to get involved in is entrepreneurship,
Yeah, absolutely.
which is great. I love entrepreneurship as well.
And
Often we think that the entrepreneur is the idea person only. But entrepreneurship involves the entire team. And one of the very first things that they will look to add to that team is accounting/finance know-how, because you cannot scale, you cannot make good decisions about how to get there without that type of training and thinking. And that's an exciting environment to be in if you want to be in entrepreneurship. It's not about being the person on Shark Tank who says, oh, this is how I came up with my idea. It's about being part of the early effort to bring something to life, and accountants are always there. They have to be there.
And playing off the Shark Tank comment, the questions they're asking, listen to the questions that they're asking. They're always about the bottom line, the projection, the forecasting, the costs per unit, all that. Yeah.
An engineer can't answer that.
No, nor can the free spirit entrepreneur who's got this wild, idea that they can see and visualize that's going to be a massive game changer. They've got to be able, again, to articulate it through the numbers and through the effectiveness of sales. Yeah, really appreciate both of your time this morning. I know you're extraordinarily busy. I hope we'll get to see more of you.
I hope so too.
And then we'll bring Andy back.
I'm close by.
Really appreciate both of you. As we close out today's segment, could each of you share where people can stay in touch with you? I'm assuming you're both on LinkedIn. I think I already know that. And then for somebody who's interested, either a company level leader who's interested in getting more involved with ASU curriculum and tapping into those resources, or even our students who are listening and they're like, don't I go toward accounting, and they want to tap into that, where do they stay in touch with you guys at ASU?
I would recommend coming directly to me. And if I don't have the answer, I can certainly connect someone to someone who does. And my email address is andycall@asu.edu, and you can find me on our website pretty easily. So
I found you that way.
Great.
I went through the leadership team. I'm like, I'm going to reach out and see if he'd have time with us today. And I'm glad you did. How about for you, Chad? How do we stay in touch with you?
LinkedIn, Chad Dean. Just run that search. Integrated Management Resources, the name of our company. If you Google that, we hopefully are number one on there. And it's chad@integratedmgmt.com. Please feel free to give me a call. My contact information is on the website, and we're happy to talk to anybody.
And I love it. This goes back to the very beginning of your introduction, that a homegrown ASU too, right? You're an ASU grad.
So biology, and then I went and I knew I wanted to be in business. And so I went and got an MBA from ASU. Yes.
And homegrown. And so thank you for coming back and saying it's important to me as an individual and as a professional to support success in our business community as it relates to recruiting. And that really was the impetus of today's conversation. So I thank you for that, because you've been so successful in other states, New York in particular, I think, right?
New York, Illinois, California.
Yeah. Well, we're
even
happy to
abroad,
have you.
So
Good.
Well, thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate being here.
Yeah.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona. Some media leans left and some lean right, and we lean accounting. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.